Food truck owner feeds firefighters during wildfire for free, never knowing they'd save his daughter's life years later. This thought echoed in Marco Alvarez's mind as he stood at the edge of what remained of Pine Ridge Forest, watching amber embers dance against the night sky like dying fireflies. It had been a simple decision that day 3 years ago, to drive his food truck toward the blaze rather than away from it. Now, as he clutched his 6-year-old daughter Sophia's small hand in his own calloused one, he couldn't have imagined how profoundly that choice would ripple through time. But that story comes later. First, there was just a man with a failing business and a broken heart. Marco wiped sweat from his brow as the August sun beat down on the metal roof of his food truck. Alvarez Street Eats had once been painted in proud, vibrant letters across the side, but now the colors had faded like so much else in his life. The lunch rush, if you could call 5 customers a rush, had ended, and he'd barely made enough to cover the cost of ingredients. He glanced at the framed photo taped beside the serving window. Elena, her smile radiant, holding their newborn daughter Sophia. 3 years gone now. The brain aneurysm had taken her so suddenly that sometimes, in the foggy moments between sleep and waking, Marco still reached across the bed for her. "Daddy, can I have a quesadilla?" Sophia's voice pulled him back to the present. She sat at the small fold-out table outside the truck, coloring with the stubby crayons they kept in an old coffee tin. "Of course, mi cielo." His heart warmed watching her concentrate on her drawing, her mother's eyes, his stubborn chin. At 3 years old, she was the only reason he kept the truck running, kept moving forward at all. The radio crackled to life with an emergency alert as he prepared her food. Mandatory evacuation orders have been expanded for the following areas near the Sycamore Canyon wildfire: Pine Valley, West Ridge, and North Crescent neighborhoods. Firefighters are reporting rapid expansion of the fire due to high winds. Marco frowned. Their rental apartment was just on the edge of Westridge. He'd need to grab their emergency bag and important documents before the roads closed. But first, he had a more immediate concern. "Looks like we're closing early today, Sophia," he said, sliding the quesadilla onto a paper plate. "We need to go home and get some things." In the distance, a plume of dark smoke rose above the tree line, smudging the otherwise perfect blue sky. The air already carried the acrid scent of burning pine. He was packing up when 3 fire trucks roared past, sirens wailing. Marco watched them go, something twisting in his chest. Not just fear of the approaching fire, but a strange, unexpected pull. These men and women were driving toward the danger everyone else was fleeing. As he secured the last cabinet, a memory surfaced. Elena, bringing sandwiches and cold drinks to the construction workers building the apartment complex across from their first home. "It's just the decent thing to do," she'd said with a shrug when he'd asked why. "They're working hard in this heat." Marco stared at the smoke plume growing larger on the horizon. The decent thing to do? Instead of turning toward their apartment, he found himself driving the food truck in the direction the fire trucks had gone, toward the emergency staging area at the high school parking lot. "Where are we going, Daddy?" Sophia asked, securely buckled into her car seat behind him. "We're going to help some heroes, mi cielo." The high school parking lot had transformed into an organized chaos of emergency vehicles, command tents, and exhausted firefighters rotating in from the front lines. Their faces were streaked with soot, eyes red-rimmed from smoke, shoulders slumped with fatigue. Marco parked his truck at the edge of the lot and approached a woman in a fire department jacket who appeared to be coordinating resources. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smaller than he intended. "I run a food truck. I thought maybe your people could use some hot food?" The woman, her name tag read Captain Diaz, looked at him with surprise that quickly melted into gratitude. "You're offering to feed the crews?" "Yes, free of course," Marco added quickly. "I have enough supplies to make burritos, tacos, quesadillas, whatever they want." Captain Diaz's expression softened. "That would be incredible, actually. Our supply truck is delayed, and most of these firefighters haven't eaten a hot meal in 12 hours. "Then it's settled." Marco smiled, feeling purposeful for the first time in months. "Just tell me where to set up." Within an hour, Alvarez Street Eats was serving a steady stream of firefighters. Marco worked furiously, preparing food faster than he ever had before. Sophia helped too, solemnly handing out napkins and telling each exhausted firefighter, "Thank you for fighting the monster fire." Marco couldn't help but notice one firefighter in particular, a tall man with kind eyes who knelt down to Sophia's level when she offered him napkins. "What's your name, little one?" he asked. "Sophia Alvarez," she replied proudly. "My daddy is making you food so you can be strong." The man smiled. "I'm Lieutenant James Reeves, and your daddy's food is definitely making us stronger." He stood and extended his hand to Marco. "Seriously, man, this means more than you know." Marco nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He'd been so isolated in his grief, so focused on just surviving day to day, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be part of something larger than himself. "It's nothing," he finally managed. "You're the ones risking your lives." James shook his head. "Kindness like this, it's not nothing." Their conversation was interrupted by another firefighter calling James back to duty. Marco watched him go, feeling an unexpected connection to this stranger who had shown his daughter such gentle attention. For 3 days, as the wildfire raged through the canyons and threatened homes, Marco kept his food truck running. He emptied his refrigerator, spent his meager savings on supplies, and worked until his hands cramped and his back ached. Sophia became the mascot of the operation, drawing pictures for her, firefighters learning their names, collecting their stories. On the third night, Marco was about to close when James Reeves appeared again, this time with his entire crew. "We wanted to thank you properly," James said as 12 weary firefighters gathered around the truck. "You've kept us going through some of the worst of it." One of the female firefighters stepped forward with a fire helmet, child-sized but official-looking. "For Sophia," she said. "She's been our good luck charm." Sophia's eyes widened as she reverently accepted the gift, immediately placing it on her head, though it wobbled slightly. Another firefighter handed Marco an envelope. "We took up a collection," he explained. "Not much, but..." "No," Marco said firmly, pushing it back. "I didn't do this for money." "We know," James said quietly. "But your generosity..." He glanced meaningfully at Sophia, then back to Marco. "Let's just say we understand sacrifice. Please accept it, if not for yourself, then for her." Marco hesitated, then nodded, accepting the envelope without opening it. His pride wrestled with practicality. The truth was, he had depleted his resources to keep feeding them, and rent was due next week. "The fire's contained now," James continued. "We're heading out tomorrow, but we wanted you to have this too." He handed Marco a card signed by dozens of firefighters. Some names Marco recognized, others he'd never met. "You fed more than our bodies," James said simply. "You fed our spirits when we needed it most." That night, after tucking Sophia into bed with her new helmet placed carefully on the nightstand, Marco finally opened the envelope. Inside was $972. Not a fortune, but enough to cover rent and restock his supplies. But it was the card that broke him open. The messages of gratitude scrawled in different handwriting. "Your daughter's smile kept me going when I thought I couldn't take another step. Best burrito I've ever had, and I'm from San Diego. Your kindness reminded me why we do this job." And from James, "Some debts can never be repaid, but they're never forgotten either. If you ever need anything at all, call this number." Marco traced his finger over the phone number, feeling something he hadn't felt since Elena died. Connection. These people, these strangers, had become something more in the crucible of crisis. Not quite friends, but community. He carefully placed the card in the box where he kept Elena's things, a box he rarely opened now because the pain was still too raw. Somehow it felt right to place this new beginning alongside the memories of what he'd lost. "I think she would have liked this," he whispered to the empty room. "Don't you, Elena?" Only the gentle sounds of Sophia's breathing answered him. But for the first time in 3 years, the silence didn't feel quite so empty. 4 years passed. The food truck business had slowly improved after the wildfire. Something had changed in Marco. The experience of giving freely when he had so little himself had reawakened something he thought had died with Elena. He smiled more easily now, laughed with his customers, and developed a loyal following that kept Alvarez Street Eats modestly profitable. Sophia, now 7, still kept the firefighter's helmet on proud display in her bedroom, though she'd outgrown the games of rescue and emergency that had dominated her play after the wildfire. These days, she was more interested in soccer and science experiments. "Dad, can I ride my bike to Emma's house?" Sophia asked one Saturday morning as Marco prepped the food truck for a festival downtown. "It's only 3 blocks. Marco hesitated. His instinct was still to protect her from every possible danger, but he was learning to loosen his grip. "Helmet," he said firmly. "And straight there, straight back. No detours." "I know the rules," she said with the exaggerated patience of a child who's heard the same instructions 1,000 times. She strapped on her helmet, a proper bike helmet, not the treasured firefighter one, and pedaled away, her dark ponytail bouncing behind her. Marco watched until she turned the corner, then continued loading supplies into the truck. The community festival was one of the biggest events of the year, and he'd been preparing special menu items all week. He was just about to close up the apartment when his phone rang. The screen showed Emma's mother's number. "Hi, Tricia. Is Sophia causing trouble already?" He answered lightly. The voice that came through was tight with panic. "Marco, Sophia never made it here. Emma's been waiting, and I just called to check if they were at your place instead." Ice flooded his veins. "She left 20 minutes ago. It's a 3-minute bike ride. I'm going to look for her right now," Tricia said. "Stay on the line." Marco was already running down the stairs, heart hammering against his ribs. "I'm taking the truck. I can cover more ground," he told her, fumbling with his keys as he climbed into the driver's seat. He drove slowly down the route Sophia would have taken, scanning every yard, every driveway, calling her name out the window. Nothing. Then he saw it. Sophia's bicycle, lying on its side at an intersection. No sign of Sophia. Marco abandoned the truck in the middle of the street and ran to the bike. Nothing seemed damaged. No sign of an accident. Just abandoned. "Tricia," he said into the phone, his voice strange and distant to his own ears. "I found her bike at Maple and Elm. No sign of her. Call the police." The next hours passed in a blur of panic and disbelief. Police officers took statements and descriptions. Neighbors joined the search, fanning out through the small community. Marco kept returning to the spot where her bike had been found, as if Sophia might suddenly reappear there, laughing about a game of hide-and-seek gone too far. By nightfall, the entire town knew that Sofia Alvarez was missing. Marco stood in the park that had become the search headquarters, clutching Sofia's school photo as a police officer explained the next steps in the investigation. "Mr. Alvarez, we're doing everything we can," the officer was saying, but Marco barely heard him. His mind kept replaying their last moment together, her impatient smile, the casual wave as she pedaled away. How could he have known it might be the last time? As darkness fell, the temperature dropped. October nights in the mountains could dip near freezing, and Sophia was wearing only jeans and a light sweater. The thought of her out there, cold and afraid, or worse, threatened to buckle Marco's knees. Someone pressed a cup of coffee into his hand. He looked up to thank them and froze. James Reeves stood before him, the same kind eyes now filled with concern. He wore civilian clothes instead of his firefighter gear, but Marco recognized him instantly. "I heard on the emergency scanner," James explained. "I was visiting my sister in town." He gripped Marco's shoulder firmly. "We're going to find her." Marco wanted to respond, but all that came out was a broken sound that wasn't quite a word. James didn't seem to need words. "I've already called in some of my crew. They're on their way. These are the people you want in a search and rescue situation. Trust me." For the first time since finding the abandoned bicycle, Marco felt a flicker of hope. These were the people who had battled the monster fire, who had saved homes and lives. If anyone could find Sophia, it would be them. Within an hour, James had organized the volunteer firefighters into search teams, coordinating with the police to ensure no area was overlooked. Marco insisted on joining one of the teams, though James tried to convince him to stay at the command post in case Sophia found her way back or someone called with information. "I can't just wait," Marco said, his voice raw. "I have to look for her." James nodded. "Then you're with me." They searched through the night, calling Sophia's name, checking abandoned buildings, drainage ditches, everywhere a child might wander or be hidden. As the hours stretched on, Marco's hope began to fray, replaced by a cold dread that sank deeper with each passing minute. Dawn broke with no sign of Sophia. Marco's body moved mechanically now, fueled by fear and the dregs of adrenaline. James stayed beside him, steady and calm, though Marco could see the worry in his eyes too. "We should head back to the command post," James finally suggested as morning fully arrived. "Get some food, check if there's any news, regroup." Marco was about to protest when his phone rang. An unknown number. "Mr. Alvarez?" an unfamiliar voice said when he answered. "This is Ranger Wilson from Sycamore Canyon State Park. I think we may have found something belonging to your daughter." Marco's legs gave out. James caught him before he hit the ground, taking the phone and putting it on speaker. "This is Lieutenant James Reeves with the search team. What did you find?" "A child's backpack with a name tag inside. Sofia Alvarez. It was near the entrance to Coyote Cave. We're organizing a cave search team now, but it's a complex system. Some parts are quite dangerous." Marco stared at James, new terror freezing his blood. Coyote Cave was over 5 miles from where Sophia's bike had been found. How had she gotten there? And why would she have gone into a cave? "We're on our way," James said, already steering Marco toward their vehicle. "I have experienced cave rescuers with my team." The drive to the state park was silent, Marco's mind racing through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Had someone taken her there? Had she gotten lost trying to find her way home? The cave system was known to be treacherous. Signs warned visitors not to enter without proper equipment and experience. At the park, they found a scene of focused activity. Park rangers and emergency personnel were unloading equipment from trucks: ropes, helmets, communications gear. Sophia's purple backpack sat on a folding table, looking impossibly small among the rescue equipment. Marco reached for it with trembling hands. Inside were her colored pencils, a notebook, and, his breath caught, Elena's old compass that Sophia had begged to keep. The compass that Marco had taught her to use, just in case you ever get lost. A park ranger approached them, her expression grave. "Mr. Alvarez? I'm Ranger Wilson. We've confirmed there are fresh footprints entering the cave that appear to be child-sized. We're preparing to go in now." "I'm going too," Marco said immediately. The ranger shook her head. "I'm sorry, but he's right," James interrupted. "He should come." He turned to Marco. "But you stay with me, and you follow every instruction, no questions. Understood?" Marco nodded, grateful beyond words. Within minutes, they were outfitted with helmets, lights, and communications equipment. The search team consisted of 2 park rangers, 3 of James's firefighter colleagues who had specialized cave rescue training, James and Marco. At the cave entrance, Marco paused, staring into the darkness that had swallowed his daughter. James placed a hand on his shoulder. "One step at a time," he said quietly. "We'll find her." The cave was cold and damp, the beam of their headlamps cutting through darkness, so complete it seemed solid. Their voices echoed strangely as they called Sophia's name, the sound bouncing back at them from unseen walls and crevices. They moved carefully, following the small footprints when they could find them in the mud. After 20 minutes of slow progress, they reached a junction where the cave split into 3 passages. "Sophia!" Marco called, his voice breaking with desperation. "Sophia, it's Daddy! Can you hear me?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then, so faint he thought he might have imagined it, came a response. "Daddy?" Marco lunged forward, but James held him back. "Easy," he cautioned. "We need to pinpoint where that came from." "Sophia!" he called more loudly. "Keep talking so we can find you." "I'm here." The small voice was slightly stronger now. "I'm scared. I can't climb back up." The rescue team conferred quickly, triangulating the sound. "Middle passage," one of the rangers decided. "But there's a drop about 50 yards in. She must have fallen." They moved forward with renewed urgency, the middle passage narrowing as they went. Marco's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. She was alive. She was talking. He clung to these facts like lifelines. Then their lights revealed the drop, a steep slope ending in a 10-foot vertical fall into a lower chamber. And there, huddled against the far wall, was Sophia. She looked up at their lights, her face tear-streaked but miraculously unbloodied. "Daddy!" she cried. "I'm here, Michiello, I'm here." Marco called back, his voice breaking. "Are you hurt?" Sophia shook her head. "Cold, and my ankle feels funny. I slipped and fell." The rescue team moved with practiced efficiency, setting up ropes and preparing to lower someone down. James turned to Marco. "I'll go first, check her condition, then we'll get you down there." Marco wanted to argue, wanted to be the first to reach her, but he knew James was right. If Sophia was injured, they needed someone with medical training to assess her first. James rappelled down with smooth confidence, reaching Sophia's side in moments. Marco watched anxiously as James examined her, speaking softly to her the whole time. "She's okay," James called up after a minute. "Mild ankle sprain, some scrapes and bruises, and she's cold, but no serious injuries. We can send down a harness for both of them." Relief washed over Marco like a physical wave, nearly buckling his knees. The rescue team quickly prepared a special harness that would allow Sophia to be lifted safely with an adult. When Marco was finally lowered down and could wrap his arms around his daughter, he couldn't speak, could only hold her as tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry, Daddy," Sophia whispered against his neck. "I saw a dog that looked lost and I followed it, but then I couldn't find my way back. And I remembered you said if I got lost, I should stay in one place. But it was getting dark and I was scared, and I remembered the compass." Marco pulled back just enough to look at her face, brushing dirty hair from her forehead. "It's okay, Michiello. You're safe now. That's all that matters." The extraction was slow and careful. Sophia was secured in the special harness with Marco, while James climbed alongside them, ensuring they didn't swing or bump against the cave walls. When they finally emerged into daylight, a small crowd of rescuers and park visitors broke into spontaneous applause. Sophia was immediately wrapped in warm blankets and checked by waiting paramedics. Her ankle was indeed sprained but not broken. Mainly, she was cold, tired, and desperately thirsty. As the paramedics prepared to transport her to the hospital for a thorough examination, Marco sought out James, who was debriefing with the rest of the rescue team. "I don't know how to thank you," Marco said, his voice still unsteady. "If you hadn't been here..." James shook his head. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Marco insisted. "Not anyone. You were there when we needed you most, just like before." Understanding dawned in James's eyes. "The wildfire," he said softly. "Your food truck," Marco nodded. "You saved my life then too, in a different way. I was drowning after my wife died. Feeding you and your crew, it gave me purpose again. And now you've saved my daughter, my whole world." James seemed at a loss for words, but before he could respond, Sophia called out from the ambulance. "Lieutenant James, you found me, just like you found the people in the fire." James smiled, walking with Marco to the ambulance. "I had some help this time," he told Sophia, ruffling her hair gently. "Your dad is pretty brave, you know." Sophia nodded solemnly. "He makes the best food too." Laughter, surprising, liberating laughter, bubbled up from Marco's chest. After hours of terror, the simple childish statement struck him as hilarious and perfect. As the paramedics prepared to close the ambulance doors, James handed Marco a card. "My personal number," he explained. "Let me know how she's doing, and maybe when things settle down, my crew still talks about your cooking." "The food truck still running?" Marco nodded. "Better than ever." "Good," James smiled, "because I think we've got a lot of catching up to do." 3 months later, Alvarez Street Eats hosted a special dinner for the firefighters, park rangers, police officers, and volunteers who had helped search for Sophia. Tables were set up in the park, strung with lights that twinkled against the early evening sky. Sophia, her ankle fully healed, proudly helped serve, wearing a custom-made shirt that read, "Junior Chef and Cave Explorer, Retired." As Marco watched his daughter laughing with James and the other rescuers, he felt Elena's presence more strongly than he had in years. Not as a ghost of grief, but as a warm certainty that she would have loved this moment. This community built on kindness, given in return. The food truck that had once been merely his lifeline to survival had become the heart of something larger. A simple decision, made years ago, to drive toward danger rather than away from it, had set in motion a current of connection that had, in the end, brought his daughter back to him. James caught his eye across the gathering and raised his glass in a silent toast. Marco nodded, raising his own in return. Some debts could never be repaid, but they were never forgotten either. And sometimes the universe found its own way to balance the scales, not through calculation or expectation, but through the quiet miracle of human hearts connecting across time and circumstance. As darkness fell and the stars emerged above them, Marco silently thanked whatever forces had brought him to that high school parking lot years ago, with a food truck and a simple offer of kindness that had returned to him 1,000-fold.